Hi, and welcome to the weekly predictions based on astrology for the week of June 1st, 2020. First, let's do a really quick recap of the predictions for the previous week. For Tuesday, my predictions for the stock market was that it was going to go down, and it actually went up. For Wednesday, I correctly predicted the up stock market move. Thursday, I thought the market would go up, and it actually went down. And then on Friday, again, I thought that the market would go up, and the results were mixed. Nasdaq went up over 1%, but Dow Jones went down about 0.07%. In terms of other influences, we have some ongoing background influences. In particular, we have Pluto conjunct Saturn in Capricorn that has been in place since 2019 and will continue through the end of this year. And that typically coincides with things like increased seismic activity, large-scale disasters, epidemics, situations that involve some large crisis, geopolitical shifts, old buildings collapsing, or perhaps changes in the government, in the leadership, or reshuffling at the tops of the major corporations. So this week, I would say there were maybe some 5-point-something earthquakes. There was at least one earthquake of magnitude 6 or larger, which that particular one was on the 31st of May in Peru. And in terms of the geopolitical shifts, I didn't see any news about major leaders either passing away or being displaced or basically changes in leadership. However, I did see an announcement that on July 1st, there will be a nationwide vote in Russia that will basically, they will be voting on the constitutional changes. In terms of other ongoing situations, obviously we have this ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, and that is something that I actually predicted in my 2020 annual predictions. And basically the reason for that is because, again, when we have Pluto and Saturn in difficult transits to each other, these typically coincides with either major like terrorist attacks or large-scale events such as, like I said, huge earthquakes or some disasters that lead to either changes in, say, how in geopolitical changes, maybe some countries are divided or vice versa are united. We have, of course, Brexit this year, and at the same time, there are also maybe events that lead with Pluto obviously involved to a large numbers of deaths, and that of course may have to do with, again, let's say buildings collapsing or there's an earthquake or even an epidemic, etc. So back in the 80s we had HIV infection epidemic, and of course this year we have this, or I guess at the end of 2019 into 2020 we have COVID-19 pandemic. And it is interesting to note this last week, there was news about Chinese study coming up saying that actually that both COVID-19 and HIV use the same tactics to evade human immune system, so that if, say, a person had experienced and COVID-19 and they recovered, if they were to get infected the second time, their immune system would be not better prepared, and they would be having to go through basically fighting the illness all over again, and or this may lead to like having basically a chronic illness. And so again, this is not surprising, again, from the perspective of astrology, just because, again, these pandemics rather came up around the same difficult transits of Pluto and Saturn. And also it's interesting to note that, like with HIV, the focus was on the sexual transmission, of course, and Pluto is what rules Scorpio and those kind of topics. And with Capricorn, the focus on Capricorn, for Saturn and Pluto are in Capricorn. Saturn rules Capricorn, and Saturn is one of the two planets in this particular transits. And Saturn rules anything that's like old, among other things, and death, of course, as well. Both Pluto and Saturn are associated with death. But this pandemic, in this pandemic, the focus was on how it primarily affects elderly, or that there was a spread in nursing homes, for elderly, etc. So let's see. So in terms of other predictions and what came up last week, I made a prediction that maybe something that had started at the end of May would continue and intensify last week and will actually continue intensifying through about mid-June. That there will be intensifying tensions with increased probability of like fires or explosions that involve either gas leaks or some occur around water or some other liquids or excessively wet weather or fighting that involves all of these Neptunian topics such as fighting over oil, fighting over religion, or places of worship being set on fire, or just explosions, accidents involving like oil rigs, marinas, again churches, prisons, you name it, all of these kind of Neptunian sort of locations. And we had news last week. Obviously there was some fighting on whether or not the hydroxychloroquine should or should not be used for treatment of COVID-19. And we had Italy, Belgium, and France, I guess, they had specifically rejected the COVID-19 treatments. Then, of course, we had riots in the US, and those I wouldn't say necessarily have to do with, anything to do with Neptune. However, other than maybe just the situation being vague and unclear as far as where it's heading, and if these riots indeed are related to this slowly kind of unfolding conjunction between Mars and Neptune in Pisces, it will be the strongest in early to mid-June, that we still have a couple more weeks of these kind of tensions ahead of us. But as a part of these riots in the US, there was news specifically on June 1st that historic St. John's Church near White House was set on fire during the protest in DC. And like I said, and already written also in my blog at listengood.com, that basically we can expect more of such developments into around mid-June. So these are just some examples. Another example of, I guess, combination of this, fire and water, Mars conjuncting Neptune and Pisces. And also the timeline matches the predictions I made specifically for US for last year. For last week, we basically had an explosion of the SpaceX Starship SN4 prototype, and that happened on May 29th, and I guess the blast occurred after the test was completed, and it was due to a fuel leak. And I specifically made prediction for last week for US. The dates that I gave were May 25th or 27th, that there may be news about accidents, possibly due to some gas or liquid leaking, or some system overload, or problems with weak engines and fires. At the same time, of course, we had news from US that the SpaceX launch occurred after the delay on the 27th of May. On the 30th, there was a launch with NASA astronauts. The initial postponement was due to weather, which again, that was something that I predicted. And of course, that was already in the news at the time of the predictions, but from just based on astrology, the transits were such that were indicating problems again with winds or with water. So it was either way, whether you're looking at through astrology or through just logic and weather predictions, it was not unexpected that there was a postponement. At the same time, this event, the SpaceX launch with astronauts, is, I believe, one of the first sort of manifestations of the upcoming long-term transit of Saturn through Aquarius. And let's see, I noted for myself, it's going to go into through March 2023, where Saturn will be transiting through Aquarius. So like I said, this event where we had a private company now, carrying astronauts that are, that are obviously sponsored, by the state agency. And we will have more and more such developments all over the world. So we will have these kind of IT projects or space projects or anything to do with like high-tech, drones, airplanes, space development, etc., telecommunications, internet, anything that's like a distributed sort of a multi-node technology. I'm guessing even maybe cryptocurrency can fall into this, but anything that's like high-tech, digital, etc. All of those kind of projects will become more and more sort of either controlled by governmental entities, large corporations, and or become kind of produced on a more mass industrial scale. So anything that's maybe right now is a startup or a cool idea or like cutting edge idea, it will become maybe implemented on, like I said, a mass scale, industrial scale, enterprise scale. However, with that, we may experience, slower development again to ensure stability, controls. So, it can go sort of both ways, where we can have more stability, greater controls, more sort of mass production, more, factories producing things, because again, you have this power of large corporations and government. At the same time, one could see that, okay, we had these great ideas and some of them will have to be discarded because they will be, bought out by larger corporations, and perhaps some of the cool projects may be canceled and or basically not receive the light of day because they will be not disappeared, but they will be, I guess, bought out or taken control over, and it will be kind of a different different circumstances or different contexts, I don't know, for any of these kind of IT space projects where it will be much more government controlled or more regulated, and certain things may not survive basically these regulations, be it because they're too adventurous, unstable, or just because there is no, things need to develop slower. So this will be the period that we're just entering in, and this will continue through March 2023. Let's see, then also, I also made a prediction that there will be, again, May 28th, 27th, that there will be some increased probability of important announcements related to like communication transportation businesses, including cars, airplanes, drones, newspapers, IT, etc. And of course, these announcements about the SpaceX launch would fit into this. Again, not surprising. At the same time, we also had news about Renault and Nissan making major cuts to basically do some restructuring to, I guess, prevent losses. And so those are fairly large cuts there. About 8% of the jobs, I guess, at Renault were cut, and that occurred on the 29th of May. And then lastly, as I was saying, that there would be these increased tensions in the world also starting from about the end of May, and we're looking still this week and then into about mid-June. And of course, we had riots in the US, and we also had some increasing tensions between US and Iran, and I think this will continue increasing this week and the following week. And lastly, I had this prediction here, which I guess it's still good for this week as well as for this last week, that there will be this increased focus on gold, and it may be a situation where for a few days things may be somewhat uncertain as far as like future direction, or there will be some report coming up that maybe we will be waiting on to see what happens, and somehow it will be affecting price of gold. So I didn't see anything that's like a suspense, and again, this is actually also still a prediction that is good for this week. So we will see basically what happens with gold prices. The only thing that I saw was that despite gold, I guess, futures retreating for like Monday and Tuesday, June 1st and 2nd, which I'm recording this on the 2nd of June. But currently still the price of gold is around the 52-week high. So I think we probably will not see too many major changes in the price of gold for this week, but there may be some either decisions or something, or some sort of a suspended situation. I think still it will be happening this week, where we may need to, there may be a pause. I'm not sure exactly what it would be. It's a little bit unclear to me, but I think there will still be more news about gold coming this week. And so there will be some uncertainty about it, or something that future direction may not be quite determined because of some conflicting news. So let's see, moving on to this week. I already went over some background influences. One thing I didn't mention is that on of this whole year and increasing in August of this year, there will be some increased focus on governmental regulations, controls, embargoes, tariffs, taxes, or some reorganization, restructuring, or even the construction of large objects such as bridges or dams, etc., changes in leadership at governments and or corporations, and this may coincide with various shakeups, either earthquakes or shakeups at the top. And in particular in US, the key dates would be August 13th through the 21st, and in China, August 9th through the 17th. And at that time, we may also hear increased news about, say, bankruptcies or loans or debt or some financial manipulations. And this may particularly affect businesses related to communication, transportation, and retail sales, as well as education, real estate, farming, and food production. So there may be some, again, announcements of bankruptcies, but also concerns about either shortages, lack of safety, or some restructuring, perhaps how those businesses function, again, maybe to increase security, say food security, security of, school children. So there will be some issues like that. And in China, at the same time period, there will be increased focus on pharmaceuticals, navy, various secretive activities, chemicals, oil, pollution, recycling. I already mentioned that there will be continuing rising tensions both globally and in the US through about mid-June, and in particularly June, I would say 8th through 12th will be the key dates where we may hear much more and about more accidents, fires, fighting, probably a large market drop at around the same time. The fighting or disagreements may involve oil prices, gas, and or situations that are around water, on water, so maybe attack on a ship. Like I said, fire at the marina, excessively wet weather, some problems with beverage companies or pharmaceuticals, especially anything that's like either transmitted through water, maybe like cholera or something, or that is distributed through water or shipped via water, or even occurs underwater, like some underwater volcano explosion, etc. So there may be some spike in infectious diseases, possibly another wave of COVID. So definitely, I would say through mid-June, things will get kind of more worse, I guess, before they get better. Let's see. And then for US, through about July 7th and then November 16th through December 12th this year, there will be more important events that also have to do with either some restructuring at the corporate levels, and that might involve some news coming up about either an end of the cycle, again, like a bankruptcy, or perhaps a leader needs to step down, but it may be under circumstances that are not favorable, where there's like a whistleblower that comes up and some kind of nasty news come up about this person, and they have to move, or maybe some scheme, like financial manipulation scheme, is going to be discovered, and again, that may lead to increased controls and regulations. Or the news may be sort of just about businesses experiencing losses, or even just some restructuring that's not based on any sort of secrets or scandals, but the businesses themselves may have to do with underground locations. So again, trash removal, recycling, nuclear power, and mining companies. And or there may also be news about secretive activities affecting some business in the US, such as like spying, hacking, something that again involves some duty secrets basically leaking out or compromise maybe financial information. And that may lead to basically increased governmental controls to basically prevent these situations, and some sort of stricter guidelines on how cash is being moved, or changes in taxes, insurance fraud news, or increased news about debt and loans. So that's for the US specifically. And in terms of coronavirus and news out of China, we will continue basically hearing about this, I would say, through pretty much December of this year. And specifically for China, the peak time, I would say, still for either news about COVID-19, either additional waves of it, or at the least news about research into it, and or some measures taken to basically implement some sort of controls over maybe laboratories where this research being done, or changes in how maybe patients are treated at the hospitals, but something that's related still to this pandemic situation, like I said, including additional waves of disease and outbreaks in China. This will still be happening from about August into December, with November 9th through 13th potentially being peak dates of some either major announcements or research, or conclusion with maybe that's the final death toll, or maybe there's a final decision about how something should be handled. So we will probably hear that around November from China. Let's see. In terms of oil prices, as I said, there will be just increasing focus on them through about June 15th. I mean, at least short term. And especially June 8th through about 12th will be the big focus, and the news most likely will be stressful for either oil producers or for transportation of oil. It may have to do with, like, say, bad weather. Could even be an accident where there's gas spilled, or oil or gas or some chemical is spilled and leads to to water pollution, or even to an explosion and fire. Other possible manifestations, of course, may also involve like crazy people going in a shooting spree, or fires, or some accidents, explosions at locations that are secluded, such as prisons, monasteries, elderly homes, or hospitals, just basically, or even on a ship somewhere, on a marina, etc. So this, unfortunately, will still intensify both this week and also into the next week, especially. In terms of the market direction, I predicted down for every day of the week, and I actually did hesitate about Monday. I only gave it about 55% chance down, but it actually went up nicely, I think, on Monday and on Tuesday as well. So far, my predictions weren't correct for this week. However, especially going into Friday, that I think will be, I'm more certain of Friday being the down day, because again, going into the end of this week and especially into the next week, there will be really strong kind of a tense influence, and especially, like I said, June 8th, 10th, and 11th, that's next week, will likely be major down days. So let's see. So for China, May 31st through June 2nd are also important dates, with increased probability of tense negotiations with partners, where either China or the partners may reject some sort of project and an agreement. and or there's an increased probability of earthquakes and some other accidents. I didn't see any news about such earthquakes or accidents, but of course we do have increased US-China tensions. Let's see, then we have on June 2nd through 4th, especially June 3rd, there may be increased news about or concerns about the value of businesses and products related to communication, transportation, retail sales, IT, and education. Then on June 2nd through 7th, there may be some also negative news or stressful news that involves either anger or fighting, or some criticism and attacks on certain leaders. And on June 2nd through 3rd, these attacks may be triggered more by like financial losses, and or maybe some leaders will be accused of gains through illicit means, misuse of money, holding onto money instead of using it towards some goal. Maybe they will receive donation and they kind of are misusing it, or just not even using it at all and kind of sitting on it, and or not moving fast enough and missing some sort of a good profitable opportunity. And then on June 4th through 7th, especially specifically 5th and 7th, these attacks on some leaders may focus more on leaders' communication, basically what they say. Maybe they say something stupid, which I guess one can predict this every day. Or some agreements that they sign or negotiate. So there will be some concerns or anger over certain agreements and the content of those agreements. And at the same time, again, June 2nd through 7th, there may be increased focus on either attacks or accidents or fires related to businesses or products or individuals that are related to retail sales, communication, transportation, education, places of worship, prisons, hospitals, ships, locations near water, navy, etc. And of course other venues that are related to like music, movies, I guess bars, drinking, gas stations, etc. Again, all of these Neptunian areas, but also retail, communication, and transportation hubs. So, maybe like I said, a gas station kind of fits both. So we will have increased ability of some fighting in those areas. Of course, we have riots going on, but it could be in other parts of the world where we don't have riots necessarily. And so we just may hear more about accidents or attacks that involve flammable liquids or like explosions due to oil or gas leaks, or individuals who are under some sort of influence or mentally unstable, engaging in some violent behavior. Let's see. And these upsetting activities will increase this week, but they will continue and intensify even more so into the following week, the week of June 8th. And at that time, we will switch from sort of attacks on businesses or individuals or locations that are related to communication, transportation, and retail sale, more and more so onto all of these sort of Neptunian locations, which again could be places where people, get drunk, or things may be happening, or executed by people who are drunk or under influence, or may lead to pollution of some sort. So let's see. And then on Friday, like I said, I have the strongest sort of degree of probability that the Friday we will see a major down day, and even more so that we will have a down week next week. And so particularly, I would say June 8th through 12th, we may not only have, in that time range, will be several major down days. However, there will also be increased news about like oil prices, gasoline, gas, pharmaceuticals, navy, and beverages, and those may involve again some accidents, but also fighting. So if there's a new treatment coming up, for example, or a new vaccine or whatever it may be, it will likely not be accepted, and either there will be negative or stressful news, I guess, about any of these kind of treatments that are being developed currently, or there may be increased news about, say, a second wave of infections, and or there may be some disagreement about any sort of research studies related to pharmaceuticals or treatments that may come up this week and especially next week. So I guess that's it. Hopefully I wasn't talking too long and rambling on too much, and you found this interesting, and you'll come back next week. Until then, have a great one, and I'll catch you guys later. Bye.